Okay, all right. Well, while we have a moment that's working, I'm going to call meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. So just before we get kicked off, I just want to make welcome Pam Nelson, who's been on the board as an alternate since our last meeting, has been elevated to a full board member by the Board of Trustees. So I just wanted to welcome and congratulate Pam. And with that, I will call the meeting to order, and we'll start off with an approval of our minutes from March 24th. And just as a reminder, so the president, thank everybody here, except for Holly, except for Carla, yes, was here. So I have a motion from that group to approve the minutes from last month.
Michael Aronson.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Michael Aronson, second.
Right, and from that group, any objections? None. Okay, so the minutes from last month passed. We're gonna jump right in. So first up on the agenda is going to be our joint. It's a joint business with this board and the Historic Preservation Commission. So we're going to be hearing from 34 State Street. So I think the way this we'll have you guys come up. I know that there's been some substantial revisions to the design. So I guess we'll give you an opportunity to present where you are, and I'm assuming there's an updated presentation. And then we'll open it up to the board. Boards.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of both boards. For the record, my name is Janet Garris. I'm a partner with Delvello, Dinellan, Weingarten, Wise, and Whitaker. Happy to be here on behalf of the applicant. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we took a few months off in part to adequately respond to comments raised by your consultants in the various memos that we've received. In addition to that, we also made some modifications to the plan to ensure the financial viability of the project. I know that we worked carefully with your consultants and your professional staff and some of the members of the board in making those changes and in discussing those changes prior to making them. So I don't want to spend too much time talking to you about it. We have our professional team here, but I will just give you a little bit of an overview. So the rental building, as you remember, this is 150 units.
I'm sorry, can we stop for 1 second? We need to call roll for both.
Oh my goodness, sorry about that.
Okay. Would you like me to do that?
Let's do that.
Okay.
I apologize.
HPC, Catherine Wilson.
Here.
Jason Sia.
Here.
Tara Garbowit.
Here.
Okay. Planning Board BAR. Richard Klein.
Here.
Carla Elliott.
Here.
Eric Talbot. Michael Aronson.
Here.
Holly Thurston.
Here.
Pam Nelson.
Here.
Chair Roy.
Here.
My deepest apologies. Please continue.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
You've been off. This is not an easy start tonight.
So just to refresh your recollection, 3 buildings here that are going to be new, 2 condominium buildings, one with 52 units, one with 48 units, with the Smith Robinson House in between and reconstituted to the extent that we can, and then a 50-unit rental building to the rear. So again, responding to comments and also in ensuring financial viability of the project, we made some modifications. The first of those is that we took that rental building, we shifted it a little bit farther to the west. That allowed us to open up the courtyard between the buildings, which allowed us to provide some additional surface parking spaces and allowed us to eliminate some of the subsurface parking spaces that were between the 2 buildings. So there is still below grade parking. It'll be below grade underneath each of the buildings rather than across the entire site. And then we were able to bring some of that parking up at grade, and that helped to reduce some of the cost of the project. In doing that, and in moving that building back a little bit on the site, we were able to reduce the height of that building, I guess having to do with the topography. So I know it's not something that's before this board, but what that resulted in was the reduction in the magnitude of the height variance that we're seeking for the property. So that's one of the good things that came out of that as well. Again, reducing the number of parking spaces to 283, but still far more than what is required, 268 required under the code. 196 will be subsurface, and 87 will be at grade. Primary entrance is going to be from State Street, and that will access the subsurface parking. Again, I'll let our professionals go through that with you. We've worked with the James Street, so the secondary and secondary service and emergency access will be from James, and that'll connect to a main internal driveway. Again, as I mentioned, we were able to reduce the height of the rental building, and we also made some modifications to the architectural design of the buildings in response to your comments. We are doing some improvements on Hunter Street, a little pocket park. I think we're ready to show that to you, together with some parking spaces and some sidewalk improvements there, and also some improvements to Breakneck Hill. So I don't want to belabor it. People who are more knowledgeable than me are here to share that with you, and then we're happy to answer any questions you have, and that those of your consultants as well.
Thank you.
Good evening. For your record, my name is Rich Williams, and I am with Insight Engineering. We're the site civil engineers for the project. And as Janet mentioned, we're excited to be back. After taking the past couple of months to work on feasibility, we spent a lot of time looking at circulation and how that works through the site, as well as advancing the overall plans, and we're here ready to go full steam ahead. The first thing that Janet mentioned that I'll just point out is you can see the central courtyard got bigger, and that is because we pushed building 3, which is the rental building, farther to the west. We studied a couple of different alternatives. We actually met with staff numerous times throughout this process just to get feedback and input. And one of the reasons why we made that shift to the west was to try and widen out that central green space you see. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. If we could pan slightly farther down on the screen, I just want to be able to show the driveway. In the last iteration, if you recall, we had the one driveway off the southern part of State Street, or the southern part of our frontage along State Street, and that then teed into 3 different driveways. We were able to streamline that with the surface parking. So as you come in off of State Street, you'll be able to turn at that first intersection you see right, which will enter the first level of parking under the building that's being highlighted right now, which is one of the condo buildings. You could then continue straight to the surface parking lot. If you were to make a left-hand turn at that intersection, you would descend to below building 3, or you would enter another level of parking that is under building 3, which is the rental building. We worked hard to maintain basically the same entrance configuration that you previously saw, because we spent a lot of time going through that with your traffic engineer. So we are continuing to maintain all traffic coming in and out on State Street. We did preserve what you see coming off of St. James on the bottom of your page, in emergency access for the fire department. We are also going to use that as a service entrance for trash pickup, but it is not for resident use, which is the same as the plan we previously presented before you. Matt, if you don't mind scrolling up, I'm sorry to make you jump.
Yeah, no worries.
We still have an entrance on the northern part of our frontage along State Street. However, we reduced its scale. That is going to be for trash pickup only. We've also changed the retaining wall configuration a little bit. We added some flares to them, which will allow us to step their height, which we think will make for a more aesthetic appearance along State Street. And you'll see that in the renderings that Michael's going to show in a few minutes. As we looked at the courtyard space, I'm going to spend a couple minutes there, and green space throughout the site. We tried to do our best to maximize that and really focus on resident experience. So one of the things that we now have in front of the building on the right that runs parallel with State Street is fire department access. But we're going to do that as a turf access. We're going to use reinforced turf that'll meet fire department ratings. That does allow us to create a little bit more of a shelf along the top of the hill. So if you've ever, if you know the site, the retaining walls step up and then there's a small slope and then it kind of levels off. So we're going to be able to use that also is some level playing area. Similarly, on the left side of building 3, that's the one all the way to the left of the page, The green space behind that building, we haven't finished completing our thought on this, so I'm just gonna introduce it. That used to be an open retention basin. We've shifted to an underground infiltration system design, allowing us to cover that over and plant it as grass. Again, we're trying to look to maximize some of the green space. We have to finish this thought a little bit more. But we definitely heard you last time we were before you, which was trying to create more active and passive recreation space throughout the property. And again, I think we still have a little bit of work to do, but we're trying to start to maximize the spaces we do have. While at the same time, not touching those steeper slopes. We're trying to be respectful of that as well. I'm gonna start in the upper left-hand corner where the pool is. We took a new look at the amenity space. Right now, the proposed pool sit on an upper tier, and below that, to the left of the pool, we'll have a lower tier, which is gonna have outdoor furnishing, chairs, sofas. We're gonna have some barbecue areas, things like that. And then the pool sit above it. You can see we have a nice patio area for the pool, for lounge chairs and things like that. The pool area and the amenity space is accessed off of what we tried to look at as a linear central kind of green or corridor. So the entrances of the buildings, which Michael will talk about, really all come to the top of the page there into that central space. What we wanted to do was maximize some of the green space. So to do that, we actually pulled the parking lot page down. So that's why you'll see it actually extends below the buildings. If you pan down the screen, you don't have to do that thing. Because I'll be jumping around. But in that upper area, we wanted to create large panels for plantings. That's why you see the rows of trees there. We wanted to create plantings that, we have some lawn, we have some green space, we have plantings of varying height to create texture and feel and depth. And I think you'll see that in some of the renderings. We carried that theme, if you want to start panning down, thank you. To what we're looking at creating is more of a central green space. So we did a sidewalk connection from where all the main entrances are to a central plaza. And we specifically are planting that with trees. We're gonna have furniture in there for residents to sit, tables, chairs, things like that. And then below that, we left all of that green. And when you look at the planting plans prepared by Eric Range's office, you'll see we spent a lot of time thinking about not just lawn and trees, right? But creating a variety of planting species, a variety of height, really trying to kind of lose yourself in that space. Because would we all love it to be larger? Yes. But we are constrained by the slopes to our left, as well as obviously State Street and preserving the frontage and keeping the Smith Robinson Proud on the right. So we did shift the building 15 feet. Part of the reason we did that was actually to widen that central space. We had earlier versions where we treated that more like a traditional median and it just felt too cold. And when you see the renderings, you'll see how we evolved that thought process into really trying to create something that breaks up the space and doesn't make you feel like you're just sitting in a traditional parking lot. On the upper green, I didn't mention this, but we'll have numerous seating areas, kind of almost like tucked away as pockets that sit within the landscaping. Again, you'll see that in the rendering, and that's to give our residents places to sit outside the building, have a cup of coffee, just enjoy the weather, meet with neighbors, things like that. And it's to try and create these gathering spaces while linking all the buildings together. So,
Hello, everyone. Michael Bettavino, architecture. We're the architects on the project. First, I want to thank the village staff and consultants, the HBC, especially the HBC chair Garboy and board chair Seth Roy for kind of spending a fair amount of time with us, really consolidating their feedback and giving us some really good direction. And I'm really excited to be back here presenting in front of you all again, because I think we have a better project architecturally than the last time that we were in front of you. I'm gonna try hard not to repeat some of the things that we've already talked about. Maddie, if you'll go to our drawing set and then pretty much all the way down to the last few pages, which are the renderings, I'll focus on those.
Is it the one that's photo rendering?
No.
Revised presentation, probably, right?
No.
No? That's not it?
Oh yeah, that's it. Also, one of our team members are on virtually.
I brought them over.
Okay, great. Can you?
I can. Hold on 1 second. This is Justin, right?
Yep.
Okay, Justin, you just need to unmute and turn your camera on.
Hello.
Hey, Justin.
His full name is Justin Davis, and he's from my office.
All right, hold on.
So one of the kind of happy things that came out of eliminating the central parking deck is that it allowed us to change the relationship of the condominium buildings to the Smith Robinson House. So if you guys remember our last presentation, there was some concern about the way the parapet of the rental buildings met the Smith Robinson House, and they were kind of competing with one another a little bit, and the connection was a little bit clunky. Maddie, if you wouldn't mind going all the way to the end of the set. So with the elimination of the parking deck, it allowed us to lower those buildings by about 4 feet. So especially when you look at the building from the front. Yeah, keep going to that front. This one. I think, the view down Broad Street, you really get a sense of like a prominence of the Smith Robinson House, which I think it deserves. The other thing that we did is added a change of material in the 2 sections of the condo buildings that touch the Smith Robinson House. So, it's a darker brick that gives kind of a visual separation. I think that was another comment that came out of our last conversation. If you go back up a slide, you'll see that we tried hard to align the parapet of the condo building with the frieze of the Smith Robinson House. So again, it's sort of a thoughtful connection about how all of these buildings meet. One of the other big changes that came from our last set of conversations was about the overall material palette. So my initial instinct was, okay, we have this amazing historic building. Let's play with that color palette and try not to compete with it. What ended up happening is it sort of homogenized the entire facade, and you kind of lost the Smith Robinson House. So I went back to the drawing board on that and thought, okay, what else can we be inspired by? So in this iteration, we have this beautiful view of the Palisades beyond and the Hudson River that can be this like steely dark blue sometimes. So that's where the color change comes from. And I think it pairs really nice with like the creamy tones of the existing limestone of the Smith Robinson House. So we have like a dark blue. I keep standing there like I'm talking into a mic. That's not actually there. So we have a really dark blue, almost like gray color that is the plinth of our new building. And then we have fiber cement panels that sit above that on floors like 2 and 3. The upper story is a white version of those, and then the one like that section in between the brick and the white is a pale blue. So I think it provides like a really nice contrast to the Smith Robinson House in a super pleasing way. The other comment was about sort of the scale and rhythm of that facade. So some of the like smaller scale changes that we made are moving some of those materials up and down. So there's some of those bays that stretch 3 stories, or some that stretch 2 stories. We added some smaller scale details around the windows so that they have a little bit more architectural detail and interest to them. The building moves in and out at a cadence, and all of that was done to try to keep the scale of this, relatively long facade, to break it down and try to, create a more residential, like single family scaled facade there as best we could. And I think is a lot more successful than what our last iteration was. But if you go to the next one, I think 2 down. So this is a view of inside the courtyard. You're standing kind of all the way at the end of the surface parking lot, looking at the back of the Smith Robinson house. So we're proposing, preserving, restoring, recreating as much of the front facade and 15 feet, approximately 15 feet of each of the side facades of the Smith Robinson house. It's not possible to preserve all of it. It's in really terrible condition. So the idea is to, carefully remove the stones, repurpose what we can, but on the rear facade, we are now a 4-story building. So the front, we're maintaining the 3 stories of the existing building. We're recreating some of the historic millwork in there and doing some fun things on the inside, which we can talk more in detail about if you want. But I know I want to try to focus on the main thing. So on the rear facade, it's a 4-story building. It's it keeps the sort of rhythm and proportion, like that 3-bay rhythm of the original structure, but at the same time, it's adapting to sort of its modern use and becoming that like connective tissue between the 2 arms of the condo buildings. You can see, so what I envision is, visitors, Uber drivers, deliveries kind of all park in this surface parking lot, and they enter I know there were some questions about, how people sequence through this building. They're all entering through this lobby and the back side of the Smith Robinson house. When you enter, there's where the elevator and the main stair core is. You have the ability to go in and out via those front steps if you go back up an image. So we're recreating that on-axis stairway down to the sidewalk and the stair that leads up into the main door of the Smith Robinson house. You'll actually be able to get in and out that way. That's what will lead you to those historic millwork rooms in the front. But the primary entrance of this building will either be from the parking garage decks below or from the surface parking lot at that first floor level. You want to go to the next one? So this is a view kind of looking the other way. Another big change that we made, there was some comments about sort of the dissimilarity between the rental building and the condo buildings. So we're using the same material palette. It's still the same blues and whites as the condo building, but it's done in a kind of larger scale articulation. So we're, instead of those small individual bays, we're moving the facade in and out. These are kind of grouped by unit. And one of Dan's comments last time is that a lot of that facade previously was ornamental. So now those units gain that extra area when the facade moves out. It's not just artifice. So I think the scale of the new rental facade is appropriate for kind of the courtyard it faces and the Hudson River that it faces the other way. So there's larger scale architectural gestures, where the condominium building has a lot smaller scale kind of moves that are happening in plan and section. If you want to go one more. So this is a bird's eye view from the Hudson River side. You can see the rental building now is all stacked units from top to bottom. All the units on the water facing side have balconies. There's that new pool deck. Before, we had the pool pushed all the way to the edge, which is great during the summer, but where we live in this climate, it was not going to be accessible through most of the year. So we pushed the pool back, raised it a little bit, and it allowed us to create this really amazing amenity deck that all of the residents will have access to, not just the rental units. The condo and the rentals will have access to the pool and that amenity deck that'll have awesome views out to the Hudson. Yeah, I think those are the main highlights on the architectural changes we made.
I think, and are there any other presentations from your guys' end right now on
No.
this? Or just because it might be a good time to kind of talk, kind of open it up to some of the boards and
There's
we see.
one thing that Justin has the live model up if we wanted to whirl around. It was a request by Chair Garwitt. And then we also did a shadow study that the Ossining Children's Center had requested, and maybe it's worth at least playing through that. Justin, if you wouldn't mind sharing that view. So this the model is geolocated. So in our software, it knows exactly in Ossining, New York, exactly where this property is. We have the topography modeled, and we did our best to model the children's center and the play areas. I know there was some concern about these buildings potentially casting shadows onto the play spaces in the building. So what we did was picked 4 points throughout the year, kind of the solstices, and just ran through the day. So May 25th, sun is relatively high in the sky, and you can see the shadows as the sun, moves from east to west are pretty much following like perfect east to west on the building.
And also just orienting everybody to, I mean, I guess this children's center is playing north here.
Yeah, so we modeled the children's center, and you can see the courtyard and 34th State in the foreground. So a little bit later in the year, again, our shadows are staying pretty much, it might start to touch that south facade of the children's center, but are not casting shadows onto the play space. In December, this is a little deceiving because at this time of day, when those shadows look super long in our model, is really kind of dark at nighttime. But Justin, if you let that play through again. Maybe drag it through one of the middle months a little bit more slowly. You can see, even though we have, 4-story tall buildings on this site and we're up on a hill, because of the geographic location and the relationship of our building to the children's center, we're not casting a lot of shadows on that property. We also did this just to look at the pool to make sure we had the pool in the right spot where we're not like self-shading our own pool. And I was surprised by this result. I thought it would be more, but I feel pretty confident that we have everything modeled accurately and that the building is located in the right spot. So, Justin, if you want to just pull up the rendering of the Pocket Park along Hunter. Oh. So this is a preliminary rendering just for the Park that's being proposed along Hunter Street, along with some new parking spaces, six parking spaces along that street. Again, this is early in its design iteration, but the idea is to honor and memorialize the historically Black park that was located on the site. So. And then one last thing I just want to mention is that we are pursuing passive house for the condo building. So, I think it will best serve the tenants in the long run about driving down utility bills and just the right way to build.
Awesome.
So Justin, if you want to pull up the model and we can kind of whirl around as.
Maybe while we have that open, that would be a good time to kind of talk and if there's questions or thoughts about particular details or components of that are visible in the model. If you want to do a quick walkthrough first,
Yeah, I'd find it helpful if we could. So,
Justin, can you kind of move us around the site a little bit? So right now we're on access with the Smith Robinson house.
if one just walking, if I may suggest just walking towards the Smith house.
from the front side.
Where you are right now, since you're
Oh,
at
yeah.
that view, and just what the heck.
So as Rich mentioned, there's some little seating areas along this path, lots of planting, lots of native flowers and grasses. I'm trying to create a really pleasant pedestrian experience here. We're thinking that right outside the Smith Robinson house could be a little seating, like courtyard area.
May I ask if Justin could pan up and look at the cornice and. You know, how, so that all clears everything, nothing's impacted, the cornice of the Smith house. Is not impacted in any way.
Yeah, that was one of the big benefits of eliminating the parking deck, is that we could kind of create some visual separation between the two.
And is that all restored to what it's supposed to be, or how it exists now? It's because there's new siding, new glazing. Are you doing anything different to the cornice on this side than perhaps you would on the other side of the building?
So the eave line stays the same, so it's consistent all the way around. But you lose that like millwork trim band. So we'll I don't know if it shows up in the model so well.
I think it showed in the photos, the original ones. I think the whole backside is gone.
Yeah. So we'll carry that millwork around, because I know in parts of Ossining, like from Route 9, you will be able to see kind of on top of this building. So we'll carry that millwork across the parapet, just so it's continuous. And
millwork, I'm sorry, like the millwork, you're talking about like the soffit of the cornice, or the are the dentals or something that, or brackets that.
I don't.
Or something.
It's almost like a silver, right?
Yeah, it's like a belt band that makes up that top cornice.
That's all wood. You're saying that's.
It's a composite material, but is replicating the wood.
Okay.
That's at the top of the limestone, so that's above the limestone structure. That's where it becomes frame.
Yes, there's limestone, I believe, above there now. And those are existing openings. Again, we're like recreating the openings that were above that band.
So within like the entablature, the horizontal windows you see.
Yep.
Are those real windows, or is that some kind of reflective glazing, or?
Those are real windows. We have a double height amenity space. So when you get up to that level, you'll have a story and a half amenity space that.
Okay, and I guess maybe I'm jumping ahead a bit, but is that why you brought the balustrade to show us what's on the top of the porch?
Yeah, so that we surveyed every piece of millwork that we could find that was original to the building. Combed all the moldings. We've scoured over the couple of pictures that are available. And the intent is to recreate the original millwork as closely as we can, but out of composite materials that we don't have to worry about rotting and maintenance over time.
So that's composite?
Yeah, there's it's like a poly. There's a couple different, depending on what the profile is. This one is like a polystyrene, some extruded, whatever.
Yeah. Very true.
Bless you.
Is the coining around the windows there currently?
Yes.
And what would the deck be on top of the porch? Is that well, it almost looks like it's a Trex color, but I'm not sure when.
Yeah, we were proposing like a dark checks board. Again, just worried about not worried, but wanting, to make maintenance and the longevity of these materials kind of.
Do you know what it was originally? Was it just a built up roof? We don't know. It's not there, so we don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
We have a couple of grainy photos, basically, and then what's left that hasn't, deteriorated.
I don't think it's really visible from the street anyway, so.
Yeah.
Is that
Well, down below, what's the
That would
main
be-
porch gonna be?
Same thing.
Yeah, so that's gonna be very, okay, that's.
And then The piers will be a white brick because that's what I believe was there historically, and then we're infilling in between them with like a white stucco that'll match all the millwork and trim.
And there's a stone retaining wall, it's been, this Jewish, it really called out to the detail. I guess that's gonna be, that might evolve a little bit more, it looks like. You got like the concrete retaining wall for the steps that are coming up at top, higher than it, or.
Yeah, there's
Still in development, I imagine, perhaps.
there's an existing, that's where the existing terrace is outside of the building.
Yeah.
So
Is that the existing stone?
no, we'll need to. We'll need
And
to.
the paving for that stone, that's still to be determined, or since we're talking about material, I'm just curious. When you get up on the landing.
On the landing, I envision it to be bluestone.
Mm.
And bluestone treads on the stair.
So the main stair,
not-
the main staircase would be balustrade, will that be?
That
Doesn't look like it's gonna be tracks, that look like be something else, huh?
Justin, that's bluestone, right?
Is it possible to get a closer view, like if you walk?
Or is that checks?
No, this is stone treads.
Yeah,
Where
and
the
then
staircases. And the existing staircase that's on the top of the ground, that's concrete, is that whatever it is now? What
That'll
is it there
be-
now, I don't even remember.
that'll be concrete.
That's concrete. Yeah, could you like walk in, see the recess you've created with the darker material? If you were to walk into the reveal, yeah. If you were to walk all the way up to the reveal.
Yeah, pan to the left.
The left, yeah, thank you.
Not in the building. Yeah.
Now look up, now look up. Okay, yeah, so you avoid all that.
Are you gonna have to have a railing on that landing at the bottom of the stairs?
On
Is that
which one?
Right,
Oh, this.
top of that wall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It needs some more, you're gonna be thinking a bit about it, it looks like.
Just modeling the grade is incredibly challenging. So this is illustrative of the condition. So I'm not sure that wall is actually that tall when we work through the drawing set.
Would there be any other stairs like down? I mean, this will maybe get to some of the site plan things that we talk about later, so I don't want to get too far ahead, but thinking about green place and recreation space and any other connections, because right now this is like very linear, all the way out to the street. But I think that this is, I like, check our what's questions here, because I think this is gonna become a very prominent part of what you see. I feel like there's more that's gonna be happening here that we're not quite seeing that could be impactful on how the house presents.
I think what's unfair about this model too is it's not all the trees and plantings. If you look at the renderings, this looks very stark and barren, but we don't model all that stuff because it would crash our computers. But if you look at the renderings, you'll see like there's a lot of plantings and the existing trees. There's two huge trees on either side that we hope to preserve. So it'll give it a lot of that like lush pedestrian feel that the 3D model doesn't quite communicate.
Wonderful. Could you get closer to the porch? Yeah, a little bit closer. So it looks like door capital columns. Is that some kind of capital column capitals, excuse me, and that's fluted, and is that made of the same synthetic material? Is this material that looks very uniform, the brown brick, and it looked like it's more there's more variety, dark and light. And when I look at that sample, it seems pretty monochromatic. Is that, do you need to tweak maybe what the colors are a bit more? And is that the stone from the Smith house?
That's a stone.
Yeah, so where was the white material on the new building? I didn't know if I saw a sample of that, because we brought samples of everything.
This is the
Oh,
this is the white material and the blue material. I just don't have it in blue.
So some kind of cement.
Okay, so
Cementitious material.
it's running vertical, so the lines go up.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to match, obviously, you're not trying to match it, so you're complementing it in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the whites in the new building will match like the lower. Oops, I mean, that'll all be the same like dove white. A little bit creamier than what these are.
where's this going again?
Those are the piers.
Down below.
Yeah, down below.
Where the, right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an existing
Yeah, that's
design element of Snither.
So you're refacing it,
Yeah,
though.
they're
Does it
falling
read
off.
that, if you getting closer to me, look monolithic or something, does it read that in the rendering, we get closer? That it's some kind
Again,
of-
the model the
Yeah,
model is a different thing than what
Yeah, it's a
I'm
little
doing.
different color and all. Cause it's pretty
I,
much.
sorry, where are you asking to look at?
Right there.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then the side of that stairwell, you're looking at this angle, do the same stuff that you have on those infill panels.
Yeah.
Is there space? Is that occupiable space underneath that porch, or is that?
Underneath the stair, no, but underneath the porch, yes. That's where we have our gym and MEP room. That's where like all utilities are assumed like kind of coming in off State Street. So we'll have the main mechanical room under there.
How were those spaces finished? How were those openings finished historically?
I think that. Oh, actually, that's incorrect. They were open. It was an open porch underneath.
So there would maybe like basement windows would have been like on the like limestone plane.
Yeah. Justin, do you have a drawing set up? Can you?
Yep.
Is it hard for you to switch to that? Can you go to the D100 sheet?
I'm glad you fixed the elevation on this.
Yes.
It's throwing me off. I've driven down the road going into it. I was like, yeah, it's a lot higher than
We got
actually had
that
it.
before we were approximating the topo and using a combination of Google Earth and a bunch of things, but now we use the actual surveyed topography. So this is like one of the only photos we have of this building. If you zoom in a little bit, you can see so there wasn't windows, but there was another door down there. Also, this was one iteration of this building. There's another one that had the central stair kind of coming down the middle.
Yeah.
And we chose to use the configuration with the central stair in order to not run those staircases past the unit windows on either side.
But the bottom piers that support the porch, they exist now, they're made of what? They're not.
Brick.
The brick.
But you're tearing down the brick to replace it with this?
Yeah.
And that's gonna be, it's not just a veneer brick, it's gonna be solid brick? Or is it gonna be a veneer placed somehow in front of the existing?
No, the existing materials needs to go.
Okay.
It's falling off the.
So it'll be new brick, that'll be solid brick.
Yeah.
Not just the veneer type tile that I'm looking at now.
Yeah, these are just
Right.
samples.
But I think this is a great image. I think just in terms of finishing that lower level, I mean, kind of creating more of a shadow box there, or maybe like a stucco color, no schematic there. It probably hasn't been selected, but in the stucco selection, just having something that would push it a little further back.
Give it some depth and make it pop a little bit.
Yeah.
I think in the rendering, it's white and stark and it sort of blends
Well,
in.
it
with the
is
piers.
recessed right now, right? Michael, the proposed stucco wall you.
I think the current condition, like if you look at it, at
Some-
some point it was filled in.
Yeah,
So,
you're taking that as a cue to to do it.
yeah, this
Right.
building has a lot of scars and different things that were done to it over time.
Is that material for just like parging, cement parging right now? You're using stucco, that's what you're gonna use?
Yeah, so it's some kind of parging over that surface.
Like in the historic photo, you read all three stories, right? You read the basement almost as a story there, which I think is kind of cool. It's a great photo, and I think in the way you designed it, I think you can maybe evoke a little bit more of that. It's a tweak. It's not.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think part of our concern though is it's a little bit of an attractive nuisance, like without program down there and There's somebody living underneath that porch currently. So we were just a little concerned about creating these programless pockets underneath that porch.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting.
Yeah.
I
Like,
think you just mean the color of the stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, exactly.
Because right now, when you look at the old photo, you're reading like as Seth Roy had mentioned, it's you're reading all three of them. Whereas if you go to the rendering, it kind of just gets lost.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So what are you saying to do then?
I mean, just simply like if you're going to fill them in, that's fine. But I think play a little bit more with color in terms of giving a little more pop so that it
Create that texture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
give it a little bit of level. Don't have it necessarily flush with the face of the brick. Have it step back and you get a little bit of shadow reveal.
I thought you addressed that. I mean, it's a minor point, but to me, the way it's on the rendering, to me, it's nice, but certainly consistent with anything that they're on the left. But okay, I mean, that could be resolved a little.
Yeah,
Find a little.
it's-
Yeah, I think it would be nice to read those columns coming through, and if we chose.
Could you go to your proposed view there? Because I thought you already did that. You already recessed. Yeah.
There maybe not enough for just that
Yeah.
stark white on white isn't the right.
Yeah, it kind of gets lost there.
I don't know, well, okay, it's a minor, relative minor thing. I'd just like to say I agree with what you said, Michael. It's a really improved scheme.
Yeah.
It needs, obviously it's some more things you're gonna be studying, paving and maybe that stone wall and the recess of the stucco and that. Are the windows gonna be wood frame facing State Street? And the rear facade, the west facade of the Smith house, that will be the same, I get the anodized aluminum windows or whatever that you
That's
got
right.
elsewhere.
Can we go around to the north?
Yeah,
Where at? Sorry.
To the north.
The north side.
The north side. Well, I'm
It
sure
might
that
not
I'm
be
sure the
mock-
day drinkers are gonna be a little disappointed once this starts happening.
Ignore the landscape over here.
this would be the view from the school, right? With the
Yes.
children's center.
Although there's
This is-
lots of trees and growy things in between.
Right. Growy things?
Yeah, technical term. Landscaping is not my forte.
By the way, is the cupola, did that always have a flat roof? Or do you know if that ever had a heat roof or middle roof?
I think it had a slight pitch to it.
I thought it
And
had
that's
some
what-
low slope. It's in maybe it's in that report. Right?
we went through, there was a couple of things that were noted in there, like the recessed panels on the pilasters of the cupola. There were some other comments about the front door that we picked all of those up.
So is there are windows up in the cupola that are wood frame or that's an enclosed space, right?
So we're opening that to the amenity space. So you'll have kind of this, you'll have this really cool view from the amenity, like up into, can you open the section?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, great. And is that a terracotta roof I saw in your rendering?
we're proposing a standing seam
Okay.
metal roof. So you can see in that when you come up the staircase on the State Street side, those are the two like historic. So you enter into like a historic hallway with the millwork, and then two rooms on either side. One we're thinking will be, filled with kind of history and documenting the the history of this building and this property. The other one more of like a lounge space.
And so that cupola is just on that second level recreation space, that's just a giant, like, kind of almost like clear story window up in it.
Yep.
It's kind of like situation,
And you can see
pretty cool.
we're having to like manage, connecting a 3-story building to a 4-story one. So that's what is happening with those staircases.
It's an awesome section.
Yeah.
It's like it's really, I think, elegantly resolved there with the front and back.
Thank you.
All right. I want to kind of make sure we're kind of touching on all of this. I think with the feedback so far, I don't know if there's other.
I just have a couple of points. I think we brought it up at the last meeting too, is you're talking about the condos being passive and looking at them there. The rooftop, are you planning on doing rooftop units for mechanical, split unit kind of thing? And is that going to be shielded from view? How is that going to be addressed?
You were still talking about it. The passive house, that's a new entree to this project. So our next task is to really study what the MEP systems are going to be.
Okay.
I have a question about the data mining, if you want to call it horizontal data mining. You use the white material on the top floor.
Yep.
Where it turns to the darker material. Is that intentionally set to line up with the top of the porch? The line on the porch? Was that how it drive? Okay, if it looks like it, then that's a nice thing. I think not a difficult thing to do. No, that's your intention.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you definitely resolved our comments from last time where the two buildings touch the house. I think it's a nicer condition than you've created there. Sort of celebrating the house itself, and then you're not hiding the fact that you are attaching to it, so you got to do it at some point. So
just one last, certainly much improved. It is to me, my first reaction is you have the main stair from the sidewalk that's narrower than the stair to the house, which kind of just seems a little counterintuitive, and maybe that's a historic. Is that the historic stair on the grass?
There was a kind of a small scale stair that led for the sidewalk up to that terrace area.
The stair was arranged differently. It went sideways.
There was one iteration of this building when it was still the Smith Robinson house that had the center stair like that.
I think you saw that photo, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's in.
To me, it's it's a very nice scheme, and it just seems like the first thing you go. Usually, it's the other way around. Where it's the same, right? Because you've got more people from the sidewalk presumably going up the way.
I envision that this is like largely gestural. Like I don't think that there's going to be hordes of people coming in and out this way. I think the residents will probably use that door, like if they're walking to Main Street or coming back from Main Street, or even the train station up and around.
Is it being rebuilt though? After now, I can't recall the condition. It says this one on the grass.
Currently, there's no stair there.
Oh yeah, okay, that's right. So could it be the same way? Is that an issue for you?
Can we look at the landscaping, which is again, I think that this is one of those where. I think a giant concrete stair there might not be the most beautiful.
Justin, can you go back to the rendering of the front view?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want a bigger stair there.
Well, all right, it's a comment, nothing that. May I reserve the right to talk about it again?
We're talking about it again on Monday, so
Okay.
we'll be back before you guys on Monday.
It would be great if that stonework, which you have everywhere, it was incorporated into the stairs there.
Yeah,
somehow, even if it's just like where it turns the corners or.
I think that's true too. That gets back to what I said, like, I think you're still gonna be thinking more about that deck and the stone, because the rendering the concrete wall of the concrete steps sort of taller than stone. I don't think you meant it that way, so anyway.
The entrance, that driveway to the right, to the north, you said that's a service?
That's correct.
It kind of takes some significant prominence in terms of this elevation, in terms of when you're looking at it, you just got that huge driveway going in. Is there any way you could look at not quite making that such a focal? I mean, I know it's got to go there, but it's
Yeah,
somehow diminish it a little bit.
Or matching it on the other side. Well, I actually kind of like the fact that it's almost looks like the front yard of the house.
Yeah.
And even, yeah.
it does go to a garage door.
What's that retaining wall made of? The same material as the building? The
The-
one that's chamfered.
My hope is to match, there's an existing stone retaining wall that's been there, you know.
Is it
they-
rounded? It looks kind of angular in there.
It's-
Is it
it's-
more rounded? I don't know, just softer.
Yeah, we could do that. The sidewalk rounds there, we could do a little bit more softer.
Honestly, and I realize we're, putting a lot of time into this, which is important because you guys have obviously put a lot of time and effort into coming back here. I want to make sure that all of the HPC comments, the voice, I think if other ideas come up while we're doing this, you guys can definitely jump in. I think, just kind of looking at where we are process wise and kind of looking at some of the site plan changes. Maybe we could just, I don't know if it's the rendering or if we want to look at the actual site, maybe we just follow the site plan.
Yeah, Justin, could you stop sharing, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
While that's coming up, I think so. Just a couple of my reactions, and obviously, I'd love to hear from other board members here. So, the traffic simplification and the parking, I totally understand, why that's happening, and I think it makes a lot of sense and solves a lot of your problems, and I think solves some of the architectural problems, right, by lowering the new buildings. And I appreciated during the presentation about the site plan, just kind of this effort to add recreation space. And I think the rendering, it's sometimes a little bit hard just kind of understanding scale on these giant parking lots. Like what that's, space in the middle of the island, how it's used, if it'll be used. That strip along the top, that connects the three buildings, just something that came up a lot during our prior meetings. And kind of understanding how that would be programmed. And I think looking at I actually understand it a little differently today than I did maybe 24 hours ago. So again, thank you for the present, the explanation. I think the one thing that I'm not seeing on any of these is like kids. And like great for adults and maybe teenagers to sit on tables outside, but the places for kids to recreate, play, run around. There's a lot of houses here, a lot of families and people, I hope, living here. And I guess it was alluded to, potentially some of the flattening of the front yard along the state. Though I don't know, running around along the busy street, if that's, the best place, something maybe tucked away in the back. I would love to be able to see and understand, where kids belong, maybe.
Kids don't play outside anymore.
They do, they should.
Oh, there you go.
They can sit outside and play on their phones.
Yes.
iPhone Aaron.
There are ones and twos. I think there's only three bedrooms in the rental building. So, in terms of generation of kids, we don't anticipate very many.
So in twos, I would imagine there would be families with kids.
It's by the pool. Is that a big deck to have a little playground or something? To the west of the pool?
Yeah, for sure.
We waited up enough.
I mean, also don't forget, Ossining has 7 parks and playgrounds all over the place that are fairly well used. So a lot of people sort of leave their house and go there and go make a thing of it.
What's the closest playground to and just like walking distance for small kids, right?
Down the hill.
Nelson.
Well, it seems like though you have it, it's a matter of programming that big pool deck maybe. I'll let them know, although I'm not sure how big the playground is being envisioned for the equipment raise.
Yeah, Nelson is probably a 5-10 minute walk from here. Right?
Yeah. You could only put a nice big giant staircase down that. I think
Yeah.
One of the things I kind of touched on, and I didn't go too far with this.
Yeah.
We haven't thought it out more. Behind building 3, there is some flat area. And one of the reasons why we got rid of the retention pond and put the underground infiltration is that was us beginning to start to think a little bit more about that. And I do think we have opportunities to maybe do a little bit more outdoor programming for, for youth, for playground.
What's down here on the west side?
Yeah, so if you pull down a little bit. It shows up more clearly on the grading plan. It's a little hard to see on the rendering.
That's where that lot line drops out there.
Yeah, there's some areas there where we might be able to work that into a little bit more of a usable, better space. We didn't finish the grading thought there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you definitely alluded to that during the presentation, so.
Do some units though, the rental units end up having a window that faces the
They're
playground?
story and a half up.
That's the part.
That's the parking garage face.
There you go.
So it might be opportunity.
Yeah, I think looking at your plan and where you have space that's on program would, personally think that would be important. And so I guess, we have Valerie and Tony both on the call here, and I know both have spent a lot of time looking at these revisions. I want to make sure that we're hearing any comments, from their end. Maybe, Valerie, we'll start with you, and Tony, we'll go to you after.
Okay, great, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just gonna kind of highlight some of their more outstanding comments, and first with seeker. So this board has been provided an EAF Part 3 from the applicant, which basically was a report that kind of analyzed various environmental topic areas, and there was a revised EAF Part 3, or portions of it, that reflected the changes that are proposed now. Looking at that, there are still a few things that I think the applicant just needs to provide a little bit more information on, and I'll dive a little bit into details on that. And then once that is completed, if this board wants to direct me to start thinking about drafting maybe a negative declaration for the next month, we can do so. A couple of things that I think are still outstanding are dealing with the Brownsfield cleanup. I think more information as to what the hazardous materials are and what's anticipated in terms of cleanup probably would be, I think, needs to be addressed in order to be able to take care of that issue and related to seeker. Also the steep slopes. So approximately 60% of the site contains steep slopes over 15%. And the applicant's proposing approximately, 4.2 of the acres will be disturbed. So of the, actually 5.9 acres. So we recommend that the applicant also provide some additional information on how they anticipate stabilizing these slopes during construction and post-construction. And then also, in terms of the restoration of Smith Robinson, again, the applicant is proposing that restoration as part of its density bonus, and then also clearly as part of the historic preservation approvals, as well as, it's also identified as part of their seeker process in terms of historic impacts. And so one of the things that we'd like is a little bit more detail on how the stabilization of the restoration of that 15 feet is going to take place. We just want to make sure that, that the building itself would be, or however they're planning to do that, would be structurally stable, and that you wouldn't necessarily deal with a situation where, the applicant is proposing to basically restore the Smith Robinson house and then preserve and stabilize the first 15 feet. And then for some reason we have a situation where everything's structurally unstable and the applicant's coming back before this board for modifications to that site plan. So maybe a little bit more information on how they propose to deal with the structural stability of the Smith Robinson house. Also, in terms of site plan issues, I think more information on the retaining walls, and specifically dealing with retaining wall heights as well as materials. And then trash, I know the applicant has noted that there'll be trash rooms in buildings 1 or 2, but it's still not really clear on how that's going to be. The trash will be collected in building 3, and I think just a little bit more information on how that internal trash pickup will occur.
We have
a couple other things, just dealing with the site plan, specifically, any proposed easements, deed restrictions, or covenants, like those different elements need to be probably start being identified at this point in time on the site plan, so we can make sure that that gets reviewed if the planning board attorney has any comments on that. And then I want to talk a little bit about tree removal and landscaping. So we talked a little bit about that tonight. This project needs to be referred to the EAC for tree removal and also for replanting for their replanting plan. We think that if the board is happy with where we're looking at right now, maybe have the EAC maybe have this referred to the EAC soon. It could even be, I don't know necessarily if their May meeting, but maybe we can get them on their May meeting for a review of that. I do think that there needs to be a little bit more information in terms of the replacement diameter breast heights on the planting schedule so that we can actually confirm the total measurements. And then also you might want to have the applicant, have this application referred to the village's arborist just to make sure that the species that are being identified in terms of planting actually makes sense for where they're proposing the planting in terms of light and then also space. And then a couple other things dealing with outdoor recreation. So ultimately, the applicant is asking to not necessarily have to pay in lieu of parkland, but that they're providing amenity space and recreation space on site. And I understand that the applicant is proposing to make improvements to Brecknock Hill as part of that, I guess in lieu of paying for parkland fees. But a couple other things that I think this board brought up tonight, and I think it's really important, is that some active recreation needs to be incorporated on this site. I know at some point in time we talked about that northern space where they have, I think you're proposing to have, you have about 8 trees there. It's right in front of buildings, like in the connections between the 3 buildings and near the pool. I mean, that's a space that could potentially have some active recreation, just open space for children to be able to play. I mean, I understand what the applicant was saying in terms of like some of that rear space, but that rear space is not going to be inviting. I mean, I think part of it is how it's not even just can you create the space, but how do you create the space so that it's actually usable and that, a person who's living on site would know like that's the space to go to and that's where it makes sense for children to be able to actively recreate. So this is something that ultimately the board is going to have to make a findings that they are providing enough recreation on site. And I think a lot of it right now is very passive and not necessarily any sort of active recreation for children. And the applicant is correct. Nelson Park is the closest park, but it is a little bit of a distance, which would require, if you have younger kids, to have like parents probably having to take them down there as opposed to actually having active recreation on site. And so those are the remaining items that I have right now. And if this board is open, I'd be happy to start working on a draft negative declaration for your consideration next month.
And before I answer or kind of pull the board on that question, Valerie, you talked about the EAC review, potential EAC review for tree and replanting. Do you
Yes.
feel like enough information just in terms of existing tree survey and replanting plan to have a worthwhile review of that at this point?
I do think so. I do think it would be helpful. I mean, I don't think it would take very long for the applicant just to provide a little bit more information on the diameter breast height of the different tree species that they're proposing, just so that there can be a clear calculation to make sure that there is that 50% replacement. Also, I know the applicant is proposing to add in a stormwater line down Hunter towards Hunter Street. So that might be something, maybe having them double check their tree removal plan and then their tree planting plans. But I do think at this point there can at least begin the discussions with the EAC. And if for some reason things need to be tweaked a little bit, I mean, that could probably also be discussed at the EAC as well.
Okay, and there's also a DAC referral for LWRP, but that's gonna be after our secret permit.
They already have reviewed this for LWRP consistency, but they were waiting for the tree removal and tree planting plan to look at it for that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah,
We actually did put the tree removal and the diameter inches on the drawings.
okay,
We can work through it very quickly.
You did, but I was looking for something very specific in terms of the actual diameter breast heights for the individual tree species. So you just have a total amount, but not necessarily, I did not see it for the individual trees that you're proposing.
okay. So we could make a referral then to the DAC just to review those plans. Okay. And only other comments, I know that Valerie touched on some of the things that you've also been reviewing, but.
Yeah, so just want to make it, everybody can hear me okay? Okay. I just
Yeah,
want I want to make note that the applicant did submit a revised traffic study addressing comments, and that is with our traffic consultant currently being reviewed. I expect that back shortly. And the applicant's actively trying to address some of our comments, particularly water, sewer. We are meeting with them tomorrow with the DPW. So those things are progressing. I'd like to see, I think at this time, if the layout, they don't anticipate the layout changing too much. I'd like to start seeing some elevations on the stormwater lines. And also just to mention that line that does go down to Hunter Street. I don't know if there's any way to maybe straighten the line out a little bit. It does serpentine, and some areas look like they might serpentine more than 90 degrees, which can create like hydrology issues. So I don't know if they could look at maybe some drop structures and that, and also, stabilizing that hillside as you do the work down the hillside. And there's one other thing I just want to note, and it's kind of piggybacking on Valerie's note about the traffic about the trash collection. Is the intent to be backing onto State Street when you're collecting trash from that building 1 trash garage?
The intent is to back into that driveway, open up the door, load up the trucks. Yeah. And
Okay.
there is Valerie, I can circle back with you, but there is trash room and trash chute for the rental building as well. And that's what that offshoot off of Hunter is kind of servicing. It's an emergency access, but it's also trash access on the south side of the rental building.
But what about the southern of the 2 condo buildings?
That all the trash collection is done in building 1 in like the north. If you want to pull up one of our plans, I could show you where
so everything goes from building 2 up to building 1.
Yeah, you have to go that way anyways to get to the elevator core. So
Got it. So that's why there's the one, because I thought that was more what Valerie's question was related to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're gonna back into that driveway, you're saying.
that's what I assume. I mean,
Yeah, true.
I would pull down State and then back into there and then rear load the trucks with the bins right from that garage door. The trash room is right there. The trash chute is right there.
I know we were talking about the walls before. I just want to, keep in mind your sight lines coming out of there with that wall.
That's why those walls were splayed
Yeah.
to increase visibility coming in and out of that thing.
Yeah, I know there was talk about potentially rounding it. I was just saying, as you round it, just make sure you're not hampering the sight distances.
Right, I think your architecture plans, I didn't see, it's not clear in with your architecture plans where the trash rooms are and where the trash is going to be located. Like, so maybe you can define that a little bit more, because it's on the site, there's like, on the site plan, it identifies where the trash, where the access points for the trash, but not necessarily, I didn't really see it in the architecture plans. I think they just need to be a little bit more aligned so that it's clear, so that we can actually take a look at it and see if it's actually going to be possible for how that trash is going to be collected.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Oh, hi. For the record, Dan Garford, Chair of HPC. I'd just like to recap, and I think we're near the end of it. And I think unless James going to capture any other comments, We're very happy with the direction it's going. I've written down just a few things that maybe will be reviewed in more detail later. The retaining wall material that's displayed, the concrete steps from State Street up to the building, not just possibly reconsidering the width, but the material and how it connects with the stone retaining wall that's on the deck, the paving for the stone retaining wall deck. Mentioned that there's Trex decking on the porches. I'm wondering about that and the color. It looks kind of more associated with modern buildings and something that's an historic facade. Maybe that could be reconsidered. I'm not sure what yet, but it's certainly not it's not the tail to wag the dog, of course. It's a relatively minor thing at this point. And the brick that's rendered, maybe there could be a bit more discussion. It doesn't have to be, I think, soon. Again, I mean, this is all going to evolve into a final palette. But the samples are monochromatic, but the rendering shows a strong variation in color for the darker panels. And maybe at some point we'll get to the point where there's also mortar samples, and it'll, what the whole thing will look like the test sample. 3x3, 4x4. But I don't think it's something that will impede your progress at the moment. Anything else? Anyone else would like to bring up?
Okay. Yeah, and then to piggyback on Dan's comments, I think, and I am actually in a moment going to open up a public hearing, which we have not yet done on this. So we we talked about the site plan in terms of the planting, recreation. You have all of both Tony and Valerie's comments. So I think that those are pretty straightforward. From the secret perspective, Valerie, you asked a question of us. Are there any thoughts from the board in terms of authorizing Valerie to draft a negative declaration for us to review between now and the next meetings? I think there's a lot of I know that there's some missing information that Valerie outlined. We can do it again, but at least kind of with the assumption that we'll have those blanks filled in. I
think we should move this forward.
Yeah, agree. All right, so yes, no.
I do have a question, and I don't know if this doesn't really impact seeker, and it's not a site plan question. I do have a question. I don't know if it's for Valerie to answer or for the applicant, but in Valerie's memo, there is a discussion about the affordable housing requirement, and the applicant is seeking an amendment to that requirement. And I'm just not clear what it is the applicant is seeking, not to do the 10% set aside, or not to do the AMI, or
yeah, I can explain that. That's actually going back to the board in for their work session in May. So the applicant has specifically requested two things. One, that the way the village's affordable housing regulations read, the units should be distributed throughout the development. And in this particular case, they are proposing to have one building of market rate rental, and then the other two buildings as the homeownership affordable. And so what they are asking is that the totality of the development, that clearly they exceed the 10% affordable housing that would be required of the 50 units of market rate housing. And so that the tweaks to the affordable housing regulations would allow for the affordable housing to be on the same property, but within a different building, such as this particular project. So they are proposing, or the village board's looking at amendments to allow that to take place. And then there's a couple other amendments associated with their rules, with the village's rules and regulations dealing with the marketing of the units in terms of the pricing and the price points, specifically dealing with the programs that the applicant is looking to go under in terms of the Homes of Community Renewal Agency within New York State.
Okay, thank you so much. That's helpful. Thank you. Great. And are we done with site plan question?
What's that?
Are we done?
It's open, right? We're gonna open the public hearing in a second. So if you, no, it's if there's questions and thoughts, that's where, you know, I want you to.
I mean, just overall, I really appreciate all the design improvements and I think the project's great. I did just have a question. I don't know if we can pull up the drawing for the new parking configuration under each building. And maybe it's me when I was looking at it, I just wasn't clear how traffic would flow in and out of each parking garage.
Can you go to our set, Maddie?
Yeah, sure.
It's a great question because it's a little confusing. So when you enter off of State Street, we now have like that one main entrance. If you remember, like previously we were coming in off of a whole bunch of different spokes. If you
Do you know about where it is?
Keep going up one more. Okay, scroll down to that one. So
Yeah.
if you scroll or like zoom, perfect. So when you first come in off of State Street, that first right-hand turn that you can make, if we scroll down just a tiny bit, that's where the garage entrance is to the main. There's an L-shaped parking lot that serves the condominium buildings. There's 100 spaces in there. We have 100 units, so the thought is at least one space per unit exists in that L. The next turn right is into the courtyard space, and then if you see at the bottom of the rental building, there's another entry point. Yeah, right there. So you can the courtyard actually is sloping down, so you turn into the parking garage there, and there's parking specific to the rental building there. And then maybe if you go up a street. So the driveways continue to slope down like along that spoke, and there's another level of parking underneath the rental building that you turn into at the end. So there's like 3 parking garage entrances that are working with grade. The site is sloping that way naturally. So we're trying to take advantage of that, of where you come into the buildings as you come down the site. If you want to go back to the site plan.
Yeah, the rendering one.
So buildings 1 and 2, the 2 condo buildings are being served, both of those buildings by the L.
By the big L,
garage. It's
yeah.
basically one
You go that
garage.
one. Go back down.
And then, I mean, the maneuverability within those spaces, I mean, in terms of turning around, backing, it's basically pulling into a space and backing out. There's no sort of like.
Yeah, in the condominium building, there'll most likely be assigned spaces, so it's not like you'll go into that parking lot and look for a space. Like everybody in there will have an assigned space. In the courtyard, there's plenty of room. We have fire truck turning radius in that plaza. And then the rental.
So the rental goes in here and then down.
Yeah, so there's one entrance on the courtyard level, and then there's that other entrance that's down
lower.
and that's the same place where the trash
Pickup is.
Yeah.
So that's a 2-level parking.
That's a
lot?
2-level parking. If you scroll up just a tiny bit, you can see like a section diagram that's cut through the site right there. Yeah. So again, we're trying to like work with the grade of the site as much as we can, so there aren't huge. There's a pretty big area of disturbance, but we're not removing a lot of soil. We're working with the topography, the buildings, and everything kind of move with the site, both north, south, and east, west.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, any other, well, we have the site plan out, questions, thoughts on that?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I just want to say that at Earth Solid planning board, I just want to say that you made some great improvements, and I do appreciate all the time you've taken to explain everything. This all of you've seen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'm actually gonna just ask for a planning board member to for a motion to reopen the public hearing on the application.
I just want to make a motion that we open the public hearing.
Nicolaus second.
Any objections? I see none. Is there anybody in this room who's here to speak to this application tonight? You can come on up and you can introduce yourself and please share with us your comments on the project.
Sure. Hi, my name is Natalie Gorlin. I'm the current board president of the Ossining Children's Center. So we welcome our new neighbors, but we do have a bunch of comments. We sent them out and I know you all received them. It was dated March 25th. But now there's been some revisions to the plan, so we only just saw these last night. So I'm sure we'll have some other comments as we review these. You know, just again, I appreciate the shadow plan, I guess you called it. But we're still kind of concerned because our garden is right there and we have a really big gardening program. So that's just a concern that we have. And just something that you might want to be aware of is the location of your pool. You're going to hear some screaming kids from our field. So just know that. So we're going to keep working together. We're going to have some meetings with the developer and everybody. So just so that you know, we're here and we, you know, welcome them, but do have some concerns.
Awesome. And thank you for submitting the comments. Thank you for showing up tonight and speaking. And it's always good when the neighbors are here involved and be represented.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anybody on Zoom? You can use the hand raise function if you would like to speak to the application. I don't see any hands going up. Okay, so can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Michael Aronson motion to adjourn the public hearing.
How do you second the motion?
Right, any objections to that?
No.
There are none. So the public hearing is adjourned. So really quick recap. I think Valerie, we didn't formally say it, but from the polling of the board, I heard that we would like for you to move forward with the drafting of the NEDAC, obviously pending the response and filling in those blanks that you've outlined. As far as the AC, do we need a formal vote from this board, or do you just make that recommendation and?
Yeah, no, at this point, we'll just have them get on the next agenda as soon as possible.
Okay. That would also be good to have prior to our secret determination. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay. I think that's all you need from us on this portion, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm just gonna echo one more time, like a lot of much stronger project from what we saw before. I know we spent a lot of time nitpicking tonight, but that's actually, I think, a good thing when we're kind of looking at those details. We're not looking at the bigger picture. So thank you. Can I have a motion to I guess I don't know if anyone I don't know if they're joint boards, but the motion from my board to adjourn the agenda items for this evening.
Eric's probably make a motion to adjourn.
Alright, any objections? There are none. I want to thank the HBC for joining us. You guys are welcome to hang out and for the rest of our agenda tonight. You're also welcome to go home. So I think this room's gonna have you out a little bit in a second, but
Thank you for having me.
yeah, no, thanks guys.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thanks everyone for your patience.
Benny,
Yes, I will.
really
Yeah, of course.
great amount of time.
Absolutely.
See you Monday.
Wouldn't miss it. Good night, Jason. Thanks.
Good night, thank you. Take care, Jason.
You okay? See you Monday.
Thank you.
Good night, Justin.
Now we're all. All right, thanks. Thanks everybody who's still here for your patience. I know you've been hanging out with a delayed start and then a really long first day item. So thank you. Dan, you can come off, we're gonna call up 8189 South Highland.
I went to the other location too. I thought it was gonna be late.
You're fine.
Guess I don't need to be driving 60 miles.
Could have walked here.
All right, so this is just a really quickly for the record, this is a request for this is a fourth one-year extension at 8189 South Highland Avenue. This is a site plan extension request. So I think Dan, I'll ask you just to kind of introduce where you are in the project. I think that just for the record, I know that this has been before this board many times. I think the last time we met, we talked about, gave advice that we wanted to see some progress towards permitting. I'll kind of give you the floor.
Sure. So as you recall, we have this approved site plan to construct a 5-unit townhouse style at the western portion of the site. Since we last appeared led before your board last November, the applicant has confirmed that they got a purchaser for the property. As we previously indicated, that the current owner is now planning to develop the project, but they are in contract to sell in the vacant lot that we got subdivided. The closing is expected to happen in the next few weeks. The only thing holding up the closing at this point is we need to confirm the approvals from this board, and the current owner needs to have a partial release of the mortgage on the entire site. So they need a partial release from portion being sold. The proposed purchaser, I know that they've reached out to the architect. I believe that they have a contract. If not, they're working on having a contract. Once they close, I understand that they're going to start putting together building permit application documents, and my hope is that they will have a building permit application within the next months. But again, it just depends on.
Sorry, within the next how many months?
Depends on when the closing occurs. If the closing occurs this month, my hope is that they'll be able to start pulling permits later this year.
Again, so I'll open this one up to the board. I mean, nothing about the project has changed.
Nothing about the project has changed. We have, as indicated, we previously got extensions for the tree removal and the wetlands permit.
Right.
Those are coming up for expiration in November. So we're just asking for a little bit more time on the site plan to allow us to initiate the closing on the property and hopefully sell the property.
I'm tired right now, so how many months is November from now? You really want to
It's
6 months. I got, we have Taryn up here. So Taryn, I mean, would it be within our kind of purview to kind of say that any extension would expire at the same time as, if there was an extension granted this evening that could be timed to expire with those other two, the wetlands and the tree, it could be in November? Or
Yes.
were those not one extension?
Yeah, absolutely. So the code allows 2 one-year extensions by right, and beyond that period, additional extensions are at the discretion of the planning board. So you can certainly time those extensions to the tree removal and wetland permits.
Sure. Any thoughts from the board? Sounds good. Yeah.
Just to reiterate, the purchaser plans to develop the site as approved.
That is the intention, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And trust me, I'm very hopeful I don't need to come back here in 6 months for an extension, but
I know that the request was for a 1-year extension. Does the board members here feel that, given the circumstances here, given the timing of the other extensions which are going to expire in November, and B, just the fact that this is going on, I think more frequent check-ins, in 6 months, based on the timeline that the applicant has provided, would make sense?
It's good.
Okay.
Sure.
I think it would be 7 months from now would be November. I don't want to be back here in October.
No, it's fair. So I think maybe Taryn, or I don't know who's the right person to ask. Can we have an extension? Can we vote on an extension based on the expiration matching the expiration of the wetlands and tree removal permits? So we're not necessarily putting a date in here, but it's 6 or 7 months, and that can be worked out in resolution.
Yes.
Knowing that.
Yeah. And those dates are November 25th, 2026 for those two, if you wanted to put a specific date.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Extension. There you go. Thank you.
Quick question about the other approvals when they expire, and that's the tree removal permit and the wetlands. Are those renewable at that point?
Did you guys hear the question?
Are the other approvals renewable once they expire, the ones that are going to expire in 6 months?
Yes. So if the board recalls, the applicant actually had to reapply for those approvals, so they started over fresh in November of last year. So I think they can get 2 extensions. I'd have to double check.
All right, thanks, Tanner. Okay, so and as this is an extension request, so there's no public hearing related to this application. Wasn't confirmed that's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Does the chair, do you want to, so the last, when they reapplied for the wetlands permit and the tree permit because this board specifically put into those resolutions that no more extensions would be provided. Does the do you want to put that into potentially this site plan resolution, or do you want to just still keep it open if for some reason you want to allow for another extension in November?
I want to ask that not be put in there, just because if they close in June, and if they have a building permit submission in, September or something, and they don't actually have the permit, we'd still like to be able to get the extension. But I have conveyed very clearly to the current owner as well as to the prospective purchaser that this can't go on for another 2 years. This can't go on for another year or so. So we know that there's an urgency here, but in the event that there's not a permit actually in hand, we would hopefully like the opportunity to come back here at the end of this year and give a more thorough update on permitting and hopefully get the extension.
Taryn, if we were in this situation, say November 25th, when this comes back around to us, is that something that we could write into a future resolution?
I think it depends on the circumstances that are brought at that November 25th meeting. But for now, my suggestion would be to leave it open.
Right. So we can. So I think in connection to what we kind of said last time, this application was put forward. We were asking for progress on the permit. I think that right now, what I'm hearing and what I did suggest was to put a shorter extension on it in light of the information that you gave us, hoping that come November, they're linked up, so it'll just make the process a little bit easier. But also just as a reminder that a closing and retaining an architect to file plans is, I think, very, very incremental progress. I just want to make it really clear that it's incremental, and I think this was first before this board. I think before I was on it, and I'm not exaggerating. So
it was one of the first approvals of the land use.
Yeah. So this is I guess it's a potential, as we vote, an extension, but one that comes with the caveat that came last time, that this is something that's still being sat on. Okay, so can I have a motion from the board for the approval through November 25th?
All right, so I give a motion for the approval through November 25th.
I'll give you a second motion.
And we will do our first roll call of the evening.
All right. Richard Klein.
For
Carla Ellia. Eric Talbot.
here.
Michael Aronson.
Hi.
Do you want to vote? Yes.
I got it. Holly Thurston.
Yes.
Pam Nelson.
Yes.
And Chair Roy.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sorry. It's
Rather than grow with things or something, whatever.
I'm with you. Thanks, Matt. All right. Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have 31 Croton Avenue. This is a request for a conditional use request for a wellness business at Centro's Naturista. So if we have the applicant here. All right. So welcome, please introduce yourself and then kind of let us know, just tell us about the business that you're opening and the request for this conditional use.
Muy buenas noches con todos. Mi nombre es Patricia Las Ríos. No hablo inglés. Aquí mi compañera me va a hacer el favor ella tiene conocimiento del proyecto y va a ser quien lo exponga. Muchas gracias.
So her name is Patty, and Patty said that I am aware of the project and I will speak on their behalf just because so we can understand a little bit with a little bit better English. Marcela Levin, I live in 108 Pines Beach Road in Ossining, and the scope and activities of this project is that the space is used for group wellness activities, including yoga, holistic relaxation exercises, and Pilates. No interior or exterior structural modifications or additions have been made to the premises. And I apologize, my allergies around this time are really bad. The neighborhood and sound impact related to that, the layout is designed to minimize any sound impact on neighboring residents and businesses. Mirrors have been installed by qualified professionals, ensuring safety and compliance. Sound buffer installation has been done for the sound system. The purpose and the environment. The service promotes community well-being and mental health. A respectful and appropriate environment is maintained, designed to improve the quality of life for community members. Business compatibility. The project is fully compatible with the existing business at the location, but it has a spa in the basement. It operates as a complementary offering focused on alternative wellness therapies that align with skincare and personal well-being without affecting the local aesthetics. In what relates to utilities, the project does not involve the use of surface water or any additional water-related systems. And location and access, the space is located in a favorable area within the village of Ossining, near the Ossining Public Library. The area is diverse and adjacent to public parking, which facilitates convenient access for participants.
Okay. So I just when you were describing the use there, you referred to Pilates, yoga. I may have missed. It was kind of general wellness uses. Was there something? What were specifically the different groups or your types of wellness activities that you're planning to have on the space?
So it is my understanding that it's mainly for yoga.
Okay.
And any other. Él está preguntando qué es específicamente lo que se va a hacer ahí. Yo le digo que especifica yoga y ejercicio.
Sí.
Anything else?
That's bueno. Sí, holísticos, terapias holísticas.
And holistic therapies, movements, I guess, exercises.
Exercise. Movement therapies.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And I saw the pictures of the place. Do you have the pictures? And it looks beautiful. And if I had known earlier, I would have printed out the pictures for you guys to have an idea of how it may look like. But they can send you the pictures, and here I have 2 pictures. If you want to pass my phone.
And it's a little hard because anything we show, for the public, but I do appreciate that. Valerie, I know you provided a memo on this. I don't know if you can just give us.
Yeah, it was really more of what I call like a process memo, right? As opposed to actual, basically this is a type 2 under seeker. It requires a conditional use approval. BAR is not associated with this particular project because it's all the proposed changes are interior, and the parking regulations, because it's a non-residential use involving one change to another, that they automatically get more or less the first requested 10 parking spaces will be waived. And this particular use it's one non-residential use to another non-residential use, so the parking is not an issue as well. So for the most part, really, this is more or less about the actual proposed use, and for the board just to review the use with the applicant, and if there's any particular conditions or concerns, then we can note those as part of the review process.
Board thoughts on this?
Just a quick question, Michael Aronson. Did you say that there was already an existing spa in the basement, and then this, I don't know, I know the building, but I don't know how it's configured. Is this use on the ground floor? Is it in the basement next to the spa? How will that?
So my understanding is that the spa is on the basement, and then the wellness center would be on the first floor.
Okay. I can pull up Google Maps just so you can, yeah. It's like right there. If I could punch a hole through the wall like the Hulk, you could see it.
Is it what was the use that was there?
Yes.
I think it's not actually the basement, it's like a lower level. When you look at it, to get to the main level, you have to go up some stairs to get up to that level, so but they're calling the basement is just a lower level.
What was there before?
¿Qué había antes en ese piso? Creo que había una de abogados o algo así. No sé. She believes that there were lawyers there. Oh, yeah, I see.
I understood that.
Okay. Are we
He keeps doing Upper Croton Avenue.
I have no problem either.
We'll get there.
Sale la dirección en
Yeah, it's literally across the street.
Betty just said that when she tried to look for the location, usually sends her to a different place.
you just put this building?
That's what I did.
Oh.
I did that. Okay. All right. We're getting there. Thank you everyone for your patience. It's been an exciting meeting. Okay.
The meeting has gone absolutely very well. Any hiccups, so it's all is well that ends well, so.
Thank you, Seth. I won't cry myself to sleep tonight. Past it. Yeah. I'm just trying to turn around. Okay. It's this building, right? But see how like just down here, I think, I try to keep turning around. It's hard with this mouse pad.
It's
See, there's a doorway here.
Got it.
Okay.
That's where the spa is, right?
Sí.
Here, yeah. So the yoga would be here, this story.
And then the other doors are to the residential.
That's here, yeah.
You said there's soundproofing being installed. Will that be like on the ceiling to protect the
¿En
residential?
el techo también?
Sí.
¿El soundproof? Sí, yes.
Okay. There's no VAR component to this stuff. This is just about the use. And just the use as I described it, because I know there were maybe some questions in the application, but I mean, it sounds to me it's for yoga and similar group exercises. Right? That would that accurate?
Es para yoga y ejercicios similares. Y pilares.
Yoga, Pilates, and similar group
Yes.
exercise. I'm using those terms because there's going to be a resolution. I want the resolution to be very clear about what's being requested. And I don't know, Valerie, you don't need to, if that's a condition, that those are the uses that were described or articulated by the applicant during our meeting, and that were deemed to be acceptable. Right, and I think the group exercise.
Right, as long as we're clear that.
Yeah.
Those are the things.
Exactly. Right, so you couldn't, I don't know,
Like a gym or something.
yes, could do, right. Well, right, I mean,
Well,
the dance, your group dance lessons
Yeah.
might fit into, but it would have
Right.
to, it would have to fit that.
Que algún tipo
group
de baile también.
exercise.
Sí, puede ser. Sí.
So like Zumba, it's.
You're giving them more ideas.
We're trying to make sure that we're understanding it. It's when there's a conditional use that's granted, we want to make sure that use is clearly defined.
Right.
So, okay, so can I have a motion to open a public hearing on the application?
Michael Aronson motion to open a public hearing.
100%.
All right, any objections to that? There are none. Is there anybody here who would like in the public to speak to this application? See anybody? Is there anybody on Zoom? You can use the hand raise function if you'd like to speak to this application.
There's only one person on Zoom. Patricia, if you want to speak on this application, could you raise your virtual hand?
No. Okay, can I have a motion to close the public hearing on this application?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Okay,
Chris, hold on a second.
Pam and Eric.
Pam and Eric, any objections? None. All right, so we have a application for conditional use. It's, I think was generally put as wellness, but group wellness, but I think specifically Pilates, yoga, or similar group exercise is the category that we're looking at. Can I have a motion to approve the conditional use? What's that? The spa is an existing use in the basement, yeah, so that's not part of the conditional use here.
Michael Aronson, motion to approve the conditional use as stated.
There's my second motion.
All right, and we'll do our second roll call, please.
Okey-doke. Richard Klein,
Or
Carla Elliott, Eric Talbot, Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Holly Thurston, Pam Nelson,
Aye.
Chair Roy.
aye.
Does this real
Yeah.
quick, does this board want me to put in as a condition that there would be soundproofing for the ceiling?
Yes, that was mentioned by the applicant, so that is
Right.
definitely conditioned.
Yes.
Okay.
Valerie,
Yeah.
I would put, all around the whole use, because onto the right of it is the hallway to get into those apartments. They'd probably hear the sound through there, so
Okay.
we can make sure they do it, throughout.
Use it. Okay.
Mhm.
Very
Okay.
I'm gonna pass it on to them. When they can open, is there somebody that is going to go and check everything out?
Yeah, so Joe, who's on the call here, will issue, Joe's there a work permit related to this?
Yeah, she has to, I know she's an existing use there or business there, and she's extending it. We'll probably just do like an updated fire inspection and maybe an updated business occupancy inspection for her. So when they're ready, we'll come back out and we'll guide them to the applications for that.
Okay, so they're ready, so they can go tomorrow for the application.
So
Yeah, have them come in.
So the village staff
Have
will
her come in tomorrow.
When that resolution is signed, then I guess, and I don't know, Maddie, I don't know.
Well, Joe had an idea, I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
You can come in tomorrow and we'll go over it with you. We do have to get the resolution signed, and then you're gonna have to do, in part of the condition of that is the soundproofing, so we'll have to work with you about what you're gonna do about the soundproofing for the apartments. So if you wanna come in tomorrow, we could talk about it.
Que eso le va a afectar. Entonces él te tiene que terminar el permiso. Tú puedes ir mañana. Okay. Pero todavía no puedes ir porque él tiene que firmar la resolución para que todo pueda empezar. Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Gracias.
Good luck.
Gracias.
Okay, and next up on the agenda, the last man standing. Yeah. JB. All right, so I'll just kind of introduce the application here. I know, so this is for 196 North Highland. We saw this was off at our last meeting. There were a lot of comments. There were some revisions. I think actually I might want to start off with kind of going through staff comments. I think I'm going to start off with Tony this time, just because I think that's kind of where a lot of the questions and issues center. So Tony, I'm going to kind of let you go through kind of your review and where things stand.
Yeah, so I think a big piece of this project, and I think this is the driving force, is the the sewer service for 25 Cedar Lane, and the applicant's now proposing to remove that, but 25 Cedar Lane needs to have constant sewer service, and they did mention that they're going to propose to go out the front and on Cedar Lane on that property, but we haven't seen any plans or agreements from the homeowner. And that would also require amendment to the plat, which has an easement on it. So we're going to need to see that. But that's a big component, and I don't think the project goes forward without working out that sewer issue. So that is the biggest component. Another big component is I haven't seen anything from DOT yet. I don't know if you've had the conversations or made submissions to the Department of Transportation for the driveway and any improvements are happening in the right of way. There was I think you are still requesting a waiver of 3 parking spaces. Just want to make note of that. And other things, I think a lot of the other items are just little, minor plan revisions. One of them is the stormwater. If you look at the stormwater structures in the parking lot, I don't know if you can go to the plan of the site plan that shows the parking lot.
Sure.
Just want to point something out. Maybe JB can point you in the direction of that.
Yeah, she's
I'm getting there.
He's an expert.
Seth just feels so bad for me right now. He's like, "No, please don't cry."
I felt horrible too. Yeah,
Was that one good on the left?
Yeah, keep going.
One
Keep
more?
going. Yeah, I just want to get to the one that's shows the stormwater. There we go.
Ah.
Now, one of our prior comments was we didn't have any way of capturing the stormwater from the parking lot on the left side. I think is that the northern side of the site? And if you notice, JB, you're connecting your basins right into your overflow pipe. So that stormwater is not getting treated. That has to tie into your system prior to exiting. But I did note that in my report.
Sorry, Tony, but and just to cut to the chase though on this one, right? I think really our big issue that you described up front. I just want to remind the board members there was the Cedar Lane house has their sewer running through this lot. It's marked as an easement on the site plan, and it sounds like that the plan that there is a plan. I don't know what that looks like for that house to go off of the Route 9 of the Highland sewer main and onto the Cedar Lane. So, but what's being said here, what Tony is saying is that needs to be more than a hypothetical solution, but a approved plan for that property.
And we understand that. We understand that there is a lot of work to be done in engineering in that end. The major component what we wanted to show the board tonight was the changes we made to the elevations and the fact that we enlarge the commercial area, because those components will also affect how we go about things. We understand we have the DOT, we have the sewer, those are major things, and some of the engineering was taken care of. And also I know that they want to see all the calculations for the shoring. So we have as requested the structural engineer to provide all the calculations,
right,
all of that.
Okay.
But we do understand the aspect of it.
And I think I wanted to kick off the meeting talking about that issue, and we'll look at the plan, we'll look at the other pieces, but there's, we're kind of talking about finished stuff here, which is part of the application and important, but we just want to make sure that there's not a basic feasibility issue where, that prevents any of this, because this is another one of those projects, right, that's kind of, balanced in front of us, over the years, and I feel like this may be, I don't know if this was always, this is one of the foundational problems with this lot, so.
Yes.
No punishment. Okay, so Tony, sorry, I did cut you off, but was there anything else critical that you wanted to get in there?
No, I think those are the critical issues. Like I said, I think at the top of the list is certainly the sewer.
Okay. And Valerie, we're going to talk a little bit about the plan, but before we get the elevations. Before we get into that, I think some of your comments tie into BAR adjacent site plan related. So maybe you can kind of read out your any of your heavy hitters that you want us to make sure that we're focusing on as we go through these drawings.
Sure. I mean, I just think there's, again, as Tony mentioned, I think ultimately we already talked about the easement, but I think, there are still some outstanding site plan comments that I know JB said he was going to address, but I think at this point, it might behoove this whole application that the next time the applicant appears, they're able to address most of the comments associated with both my memo and Tony's memo, as well as the easement issue. But a couple things dealing with the BAR site plan issues is the retaining walls. And I know that there's the structural component, but there's also the visual component associated with this. Right now, they're proposing just to do a concrete wall, and it's not really clear how much of the wall is actually going to be seen visually when you're driving along Route 9. And also, from not only from the front, looking at the front of the building, but also in terms of both sides of the building or sides of the property when you're driving to and from or along Route 9. And then also in terms of architecture, one of the things that Tony and I, we actually had a call and we looked at this very carefully, that the proposed entryway into the apartments is actually through the garage and not necessarily through the front of the building. And it's a little deceiving in the proposed front elevation. It almost looks like there's an entryway to the garage itself for like a car, a vehicle, but it's actually that's the entryway for the pedestrian.
Is this, hold on,
That's just the corner.
it's not this, okay.
There's a whole.
No.
There is, it should there is a. No,
Is it-
Other direction?
Yeah, right there. You can just see it right there.
Okay. Yeah, hold on.
If you go down, that's only has one. It has both.
But that's that drawing right there is what Valerie is talking about, and I think that's been throwing me off. I think we probably talked about it. But the scale of that archway is, I mean, I look at that and I read it as a garage, and
Okay.
but that's the front end. That's the pedestrian
Is
front.
that facing Highland?
That's facing Highland. That's not a car entrance.
It's not? No.
No.
Is
And
there
that's-
a way to?
Yeah.
And that's why we're recommending maybe they provide a rendering that actually shows what you're gonna see for the whole the entire property that fronts Route 9. Because I think that has been part of the confusion, is that you're only seeing the building, but you're not seeing the garage portion and the retaining walls along with the building.
Yeah, you're gonna look at that opening and see cars parked in a garage. When you look at that open archway, you'll be looking at that.
It's like a garage, even though it's designed, it's a pathway with steps leading into it, off of a lawn. So it's
Was it there? I don't know.
Yeah, the last page.
The last page.
Yep, that's the pictures. That's neighborhood pictures.
Yeah.
As you can tell, there are other finishes similar to that, but if you go out one more. There you go.
Right, but that's still
Then
I
you
think-
go.
keep going up.
That's the old.
that's the street elevation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but you're not seeing the actual parking garage, I mean, the actual parking spaces as well. Like there's another portion of that property.
Right. So the north of the house is where the cars enter, and I think this is less of a orthogonal elevation, and this is a rendering
Yeah.
of how this building sits next to the parking lot, how the retaining walls that form the parking lot are.
We can provide a 3D coming from, both sides of Highland.
Both sides. I think this one is probably like just barely oblique coming from the south, from the
Yeah.
south, so you can see that L-shaped retaining wall
Yes.
that you're building. Like almost even an aerial rendering, just
Yeah.
like looking like almost like an Axon site plan type rendering.
Yeah, we can.
But that entrance, I think,
Well, I'm kind of okay. So the entryway, I mean, that's something we can work with.
Yeah.
But I wanted to show that
Yeah.
one thing that the board had, they now like the dormers from the past,
Yeah.
and I thought this was the best improvement on that, on the big dormer that we had before.
those are the ones that stuck out over the.
Yes.
I do think that the scale is more appropriate of that roof line. And I guess the windows are now more aligned, right? The windows were
Yeah.
not. You have 4 distinct
Yeah.
window bays.
Yeah.
I do think that the way this reads, I just misread, or I think.
I think it's
the parking lot.
but that's right. I mean, that's making this smaller. I mean,
But I don't know if it's just making it smaller and make the brick bigger. I think it's it's the end. The other part I think that Valerie and Tony were talking about a minute ago is also when you're walking. It's not like you're walking off the street into the building. You're walking off the street into the parking lot, and then you walk along the parking lot to an entrance. I guess
Yeah, but I understand the comment, but
Yeah.
that's not much different than a lot of the all the buildings.
It's fair.
Yeah.
But like
I mean,
understanding
you
that
go
it's
from the
entrance to
parking
building.
lot into a building.
Yeah.
So most likely, one of the things that we the way we looked at it, it was trying to emphasize the entry by having the symmetry of the windows and then making that so we knew where the entry to the back was, but we don't expect that to be used a lot by the residents.
I get that, right, they're gonna park and they're gonna walk in.
Yes.
I mean, I think that maybe scale is the wrong, maybe scale's not the problem.
Right.
But maybe scale's not just the problem, I don't maybe that a big opening like that is appropriate, but like differentiating it,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know.
not- yeah.
There's just something.
I mean, is there a functional reason that it has to be that wide? I mean, I guess my question would be either, as Seth is saying, you know, delineating it somehow architecturally with, I don't know, doors or something, or narrowing it a little bit, because if in fact it's not, so people would walk in off the street to visit somebody maybe in the apartment building. You're saying most people will park their cars and go in whatever that entrance is on the side, but something that shows that it's the entry to the building in some form or fashion.
I mean, I like, there's certain perspectives, I'm just thinking about it, like, that's a kind of a cantilever parking lot underneath that area, so like, it's dark, so having a big opening there is probably good.
And also, it's another thing we did, you know, you had issues with a big cantilever.
Yeah.
We reduced the cantilever for about 3 feet. It's still a little cantilever, but it's about 8, yeah, but it's 18 inches down.
Can you bracket?
Yeah.
I think it's better than what we saw before.
Yeah.
I don't know if that cornice that goes across this storefront could go, I don't know.
Right.
You go across there, maybe to soften that cantilever a little bit, but.
I think as I look at it, looking at it, we have the discussion.
Yeah.
I'm sure the opening now probably will match the size of the windows above. You know, well, and then we can change architecturally some of the items.
And before the storefront was just one storefront bay, now you've got two glass bays, can we just look at the plan there, the change there and that?
Yeah, the
That
other,
was important.
it's still 2 offices, it's still 2 areas, one in the back, one in the front.
Right, but they're bigger.
Yes, so we have a total of 1,200 square feet, one more, so.
Total combined, it's a combined total.
Yeah, 1,200.
What kind of business do you envision that street facing?
That probably is gonna be a small office in the back. It's about 500 square feet, and then we have 700, close to 800 square feet in there.
That's a 725 in the
725
front and 480 in the back.
Your 725 is close to 800.
No, but because we didn't count the.
Yeah.
We did look into.
You're not counting the bathroom.
Yeah, we didn't. We did look at one point, due to the finance and stuff, to remove the elevator, but code wise is one of the most complicated. Nobody seems to agree if an elevator is needed or not.
I like the elevator.
I'm having some, not second thoughts, but again, about that entrance on Highland. What I'm wondering, and you don't have to necessarily go back to it, Maddie, but if in fact we do narrow the entrance, then you've got this sort of big blank wall of brick to the left of it. I just not sure how that portion of the building should read and be treated. It just is a bit of a mystery to me.
Yeah.
Is it like an open
Yes.
windowless window or something with planters?
Yeah, something like if it's not gonna be a real space, something that can break it up a little bit.
Instead of one wall columns, maybe that even fix your.
I'm thinking all of
cantilever, your
flat.
cantilever issue,
Flat.
right, then the colonnade, yeah, exactly, it's important.
It's dark.
Yeah, it'll be open on one side, right, so this is what, it's like, you need, this project needs and has always needed an axon, like it needs that. It's just because it's unusual in the way that the parking is under half the building. And I think that's a lot of what these comments are, but I agree, yeah, that black, that stone cladding, needs some sort of differentiation. I mean, you have like on the storefront, you got that stone plinth could go across and you could have, you know, whatever, stucco, or I just like something,
Yeah.
again, just to
And how will you, is there going to be signage for the commercial space in the back, or I'm not suggesting that it go there, but I mean. If there is a commercial space in the back, let's say
Maybe there
some
should
kind
be-
of office, how will people know that it is there?
We can include signage there, yeah.
And when you go to that street facing storefront, are you parking in the lot and then walking outside and around, or how's that?
We will have doors on both sides.
Oh, there'll be an entrance to the commercial from the parking.
This is probably the plan that we were just looking at, but I was paying attention to that from one.
Oh, wait, wrong one.
I would just like to, perhaps I would, just want to echo, what Chairman Roy and, Member Aronson was saying about the entrance to the street facade along, Highland. I do think that what the changes you made to the upper stories and the proportions to the dormers are an improvement, but I do feel like it is, you know, a little unresolved with the large opening looking, you know, in this blank space and kind of understanding how the building interacts with the street frontage. And I understand that some of these things are practical considerations and trying to get parking and opportunity to lever, but I would just push you to think some more about the way that building actually is sited on the space, because I think the other commercial spaces that are there to the south of that, although they are modest and simple, they do have like I felt like they were, you know, they had some, you know, the sense of like the era and that they were built in, and they're still look, they still have like charm and you know, aging. So just kind of thinking about like those other buildings around you, and like they're kind of in this odd area where it's commercial and residential, and there is a lot of harsh transitions around there. And what I've noticed is like, and this is what I see with even applicants, conditions we've approved recently, some of which you worked on, is that, you know, what you see on plan, what you see in renderings are not always really how you experience it on the street, and you know, it's a difficult thing to do. But I think that people, you know, architects should push themselves to really think about materiality they're using, how that feels to people walking by on the street. Is it cold? Is it harsh? Is there, you know, or does it feel like, you know, like it's really trying to, you know, bridge the space between the areas that it's connecting. And I think that's a challenge for all architects, and certainly if you're doing stuff in your, you know, village context where you have the commercial very close to the resident.
And it does, I mean,
And
it may not,
use in a
yeah,
space.
it may not be there yet, but that's where we're trying to do the lower band, which is kind of, you know, echoing the next door commercial, and then the residential, it's kind of echoing the adjacent, which is kind of up on the hill.
Yeah.
So it's kind of.
Those are my comments.
Yeah, and I realize we're getting late. I was just gonna, but when we were looking at that basement, the ground floor plan there and the office space, I'm sorry, just put that back.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure we talked about this before, but that office space too, as we're talking about light and just kind of how dark, like the storefront's great because it's you're open to the street and you're bright. There's like these two little windows that are not windows out into the outside. They're
We
windows.
can put the windows on the back.
Can you,
That's-
you can
yeah.
have, okay, it's not, that's not like the lot line condition, yeah, that's, cause that's like, I would be,
Yes.
depressed within, 10 minutes of being that.
Is that a window to the background?
I'm glad I could make you laugh. So that's one comment, and then just like go to the bottom of this plan, cause like we keep on talking about the entrance, I'm just gonna point out that this plan does not show a like 9-foot wide entrance, it shows like a 4-foot door, so that does not match, and it does show a window. Where I think Holly was suggesting a window with so it's actually there on the plan, it's just not in the elevation, so just kind of coordinating these, figuring that out. And then yeah, and so I think I'll mention that just to unless there's any other comments, just to wrap this up, and I'll open a public hearing in a second. The bottom line, and Valerie articulated this, there's a lot of open comments from, kind of critical open comments from that. I think we paid a lot of attention to the VAR, which is where you have to make progress. But I think it's really important before we look at this again, you know, it's nice to have this conversation, but this conversation means nothing if the site can't be built because of these other issues. So I, implore you to go back with your engineering team with all those issues before we come back to take another pass at this. So I'm just gonna say that. Can I have a motion to reopen the public hearing on the application?
First, I'll make the motion to reopen the public hearing.
How do you second the motion?
All right, so second, any objections? There are none. We're now in the public hearing. So there's nobody in the room. If there's anybody on Zoom would like to speak to this application, I don't know if there is. There's nobody else in the participants list. So I have a motion to adjourn the public.
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
All person something.
Right, any objections? Okay, and the hearing is adjourned. Staff, any of the last comments? I know we just spoke a lot about this that we didn't mention. We spoke it all. All right. We're good. KB, thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn this agenda item?
Eric's going to make a motion to adjourn this agenda item.
How do you second the motion?
All right, any objections to that? There are none. JB, you're excused.
Thank you.
And all right, before we jump out of here, just really quickly, just the adjourned matters. 45 Central, I believe this is now subject to a recently passed moratorium on battery storage facilities by the DOT. So that'll be removed from the agenda. We have 59 Dale. I think this is coming back to us.
We have to reach out to them about next steps. This is the garage roof.
Okay, so staff will reach out to them to see where they stand. 209, 211 Main. This one.
They were before the BOT about some of the utility work and how it's going to interact with village parcels. I believe we're still waiting for a parking study from them as well, so they've got a ways to go still.
Right. They're working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Not really changes. That's good. Sorry, was there something you wanted to add, Valerie? Or?
No, I was just sorry. I'm saying yes. Sorry.
217 Main Street. This one I think was a conditional use that ran into a parking conundrum. So this is on them to come back to us, or are we almost at that point?
I think we're going to reach out to them and tell them, because this was sort of paused at their option.
Yeah.
And tell them, okay, we understand that you were researching your options, but you got to sort of wrap this up. So if it's the will of the board, we will tell them that they'll be removed for next meeting unless they submit something updated.
All right. And 171 Croton, I guess there's stuff happening behind the scenes on that one.
There's a lot happening behind the scenes on that one. They are going to be back before the Board of Trustees to speak again about their request for a payment in lieu of parking on May 13th.
Okay. Sounds good. And I have. Is there anything else that we need to touch on tonight? This from anybody? No.
I just want to say good job, Maddie, dealing with all that.
Thank you, Maddie. I know that was like really upsetting and frustrating.
I'm sad because and I want to really give a shout out to our IT team and to Jamie Hoffman in particular. They have torn themselves into pretzels trying to make sure that this worked. Yeah. And they've done a really, really good job. I know that we'll get there, but I think when Joe can attest to the sound quality when it's working. He said it was like the best ever.
Yeah, it's
very good.
Thank you, Tom.
But this worked. It worked. We were fine. Yeah. We were good. And in fact, like if this was what the setup when we gave you the room, we would have been like. Sorry. So it's all good. Other than the fact that Al keeps on looking at your computer because it's making noise.
I know.
Every time everyone speaks there.
But look at the split screen. It's cool, right? Yeah, when it works, it's going to be awesome.
Yes, so. Totally cool. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Michael Aronson, motion to adjourn the meeting.
We are.
Eric Talbot said it.
Any objections? I hope not. Thank you.
All right, thanks again, everybody. Good night, Tony, Valerie,
Hey,
Amy, Joe.
everybody.
Good night.